Welcome back to the Property Frontline. Today I'm here with Adam Stephenson from FutureSett. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Deborah. Glad to be here today. Very excited.
Thanks for taking the time. Our topic today is how much deposit do I really need to buy a property now? It's a very, very broad topic. And of course, the media loves to make headlines out of this. But before we get really, into the deep end of the pool, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I've been a mortgage broker for just over 5 years now. Got a background in sort of finance as an accountant and auditor, also a marketing background as well. So yeah, just came into sort of mortgage broking about 5 years ago, sort of found a bit of a niche there where I guess from my own experience from buying property was just, someone's buy property, you don't really know what's going on in the process.
Mm.
And once you settle on a loan, nothing really happens. You don't get any advice as to how to sort of like pay down those loans sooner, how to sort of draw equity out to start investing in property and where to invest and who should you use. So I sort of started to create a bit of a process and a sort of journey for clients to sort of take away that sort of anxiety away from buying property, and then give that sort of education throughout the process, lots of updates, and then post settlement you sort of have that sort of continued support, how to sort of get rate reductions, how to sort of to know what your options are going forward, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I got into it, and that's why I love sort of helping clients and having to buy property, have to improve their cash flow, having to create wealth, and just setting them up with a team of experts like accountants, financial advisors, buyers agents, solicitors. So again, you'd have to go look at those people yourself. You've got tried and tested people to sort of support you, and once you've sort of got a team around you, then suddenly you're in a much better position to sort of not be fearful of property anymore and do that sort of fingers crossed, I hope I get it approach. It's more of I understand what my limitations are for these reasons. I understand my cash flow, and it makes the journey then just way more smooth to navigate property, essentially.
Yeah. And these days, of course, it is a documentary minefield. So it is good to find a good mortgage broker so that you don't have to really start from base camp again, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's it. It's about working with people that you trust and can articulate your scenario to you and how you're sort of being protected in the loan process. And if you're not getting that sort of level of comfort, then that's when in my opinion, you should be sort of going to the right person. Because again, like with accountants, like financial advisors, buyers agents, we're not all made the same. So you've got to sort of like find out, who's got the right processes, who's going to look at my longer term vision as opposed to just the transaction right now. Which you go to a bank, for argument's sake, they're not looking about your cash flow position or what you want to do after the property set. They're just thinking transact. That we can get you a home. Yes, of course we can. We can refinance you. Yes, of course we can. But that's it. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg to all the things that you need to be aware of. And there's so many more options that are out there for you. And you only know that once you know it, and she needs the right sort of people to help you with that sort of guidance, essentially.
Yeah. And this is, without notice, but it reminds me of a conversation I had with someone earlier this week. There was some people who were pushing this person into buying a particular property, and they were using the broker within the so-called buyer's agency. So, that is a recipe for disaster. You always need independent advice, I believe, so that someone is actually looking at the numbers from, the individual's perspective, not just, trying to flog property, which is, real.
So, and that's the way I set up my team. Is they're all independent advisors, so financial advisors, accountants. They're not all in my company, essentially. And the reason for that is to make sure the client is getting independent advice. So if that particular accountant starts to become, unable to sort of handle his lead flow, or goes on holiday, you want to be able to use other people in that team. So it's not something purely in your business for a double dip on commissions and fees and payments. It's more like, I'm referring to this buyer's agent or this accountant because I believe they're going to just help you and they understand structure, and they're just going to just get you to the next spot in the right way, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that leads quite well into our topic for today, which is, yeah, how much deposit do we really need right now? Because that's such a loaded question, isn't it? And there's so many decisions around it. So just on that topic, where to start, but um, so how would you answer that question, which I get asked all the time, believe it or not? How much
Yeah.
deposit should I really be using in the current market?
Yeah, and look, it's a loaded question because there's so many
Right.
variances to that. The default that most people think is I need 20%, and
Yeah.
that's just one sort of assumes I need 20%. So you look at $1 million property, you think I need $200,000 for that. Plus, you obviously got stamp duty and all the other costs you've got to pay as well. So, but the reality is you don't need 20%, and everyone's circumstances are very different.
Mm.
Some people say people hear stories out there like I bought a property with no deposit and 5%, and that it's probably true because in short, lenders will generally lend up to 80% loan to
Mm.
value ratio, so 20% deposit, and that will attract a certain interest rate. Now you can go to sort of 90%, so a 10% deposit, but the rate interest will go up, and you have to pay lenders mortgage insurance. So lenders mortgage insurance is sort of an insurance to the bank. So you're now a higher risk sort of client essentially, because you're putting in less of your dollars into it. So you can go up to 90%. So there's the sort of 10% deposit. Now there's some lenders again, especially in the owner occupied space, who are doing 95% or 98% loan to value ratio.
Well,
So not all lenders do it. So you might go to your bank and say, "Can you do a 95% or 98%?" And they say, "No, we don't do that. It's 90%, it's 80%." And you think, "Oh, that's it. Banks can't do it." That we've got probably 50 lenders plus on our panel, and everyone has different sort of policy niches and sort of appetites for risk. And that's how you can say, "Well, look, you can go to this lender with the amount of cash you've got. You could do a 98%, and that will cover the sort of the deposit amount plus your on costs, and you could probably buy property." Whereas if you went to another bank who said you can only do 90% or 80%, your property journey with that particular bank ends. And that's where people sometimes think, oh, they just give up. So they go, right, I've spoken to two banks, I can't do it, and just think it's nullified. There is also an opportunity to buy property with no deposit. So again, if you're in a situation, again, this will depend on your circumstances, but if say you've got parents who've got a property and they've got low levels of debt on that property, or it's unencumbered, there's no debt on that property, they can go guarantor for you. So what that means is they put up their property as security for the deposit. So if say you're going to buy a property at $500,000, you can, that's the purchase price. You can actually borrow $500,000 to buy that property plus your costs as well. So imagine you've got no cash in the bank, you could go and borrow $530,000, but you've got to have the guarantor in place. So what the bank says is like, okay, if something goes wrong and you can't make these defaults because your payments are quite high, essentially because you're borrowing the full amount.
yeah.
If anything goes wrong, we can take, I guess, the other security as a means of paying us back if you can't make the repayment. So there's a risk element there, and clients have to get legal advice on that. The guarantors have to get legal advice on that. And again, as a mortgage broker, I'll guide my clients through that process. I'm doing one right at this moment for a couple who are guarantors for their son. So no physical cash changes hands,
Yeah.
but their security acts as a sort of a comfort blanket for the banks, and he can now borrow more than he needs to get the property and can move forward with that purchase. So to go back to the very first question, how much deposit do you need? It's anywhere from 20% to almost 0%, and it'll come down to your particular situation, your type of asset that you're purchasing. So investment property versus an owner occupied property will attract different LVRs, loan to value ratios. So
Yeah.
you might not be able to get 98% on an investment. Probably very unlikely. And it's just navigating that. And I would say to clients that the more you can unpack your financials, understand your situation, and start looking at your options, this is going to sort of pave the way for you to sort of start planning for the future around how do I buy investments? How do I buy a home to live in? as opposed to just what most people do is just when they're ready to buy, they've got the property bug and they want, I want to go buy property. If there's no plan essentially, now it's like they go straight into sort of looking at properties, then go to the bank or go to a broker, and it's like, unfortunately, you can't do it at this point in time.
Yeah.
But if they've gone back 6 months or gone back 12 months, do that assessment, unpack your options, start planning. You go, right, I know I need to get X amount of dollars of cash to purchase, and I can do it in the future. And these are my options with different lenders, essentially.
Yeah. And of course, there's also the guarantees, like the federal gifts and different grants and things like that, where, people can draw upon those. But, once again, it comes down to planning, doesn't it? It's worthwhile having that conversation at least 6 months before you really want to get going. Yeah. Okay.
You just touched on there. If you're a first home buyer, there is state incentives. There's sort of government incentives to get people into homes sooner. So again, you've got to hit certain criteria, wage caps and property price limits. But again, you can potentially sort of do a 95% or 5% deposit with certain lenders and avoid lenders' mortgage insurance. So there's those sort of incentives. But again, depends on your circumstances. And there's so much to unpack there. That you need. That's why you start planning with your mortgage broker, like now. I say to guys, don't come to me when you sort of just want to transact. That's great, but just come to me when you're thinking about it. Let's start planning that journey, and then you're going to have a much better, smoother process going forward with your expectations and that sort of property journey.
Yeah. And so this probably has been answered a little bit, but if someone was to come to you and say, well, how can I decide what's best for me? How would you help people with that question?
Yeah, it's sort of it's that unpacking your financials. And that, for me, there's two types of sort of way of getting a loan approved. You can go to sort of like a bank or broker who just is very transactional, just quickly work things out and lodge an application. For me, I sort of take more time. For me, I want to sort of really understand your financial position, look at your cash flow position, make sure we're not overexposing you for any debt, really understand your sort of serviceability, and what sort of funds, what options are out there for you, which sometimes is going to numerous lenders to see if you can fit policy or obtain certain incentives or government schemes, which takes a bit more time. But by doing that, you get much more comfort in sense of why I'm recommending certain lenders. It's not for my benefit. This lender's really quick and just get it done. These lenders are benefited because of these reasons. You get these certain features or these incentives, whatever it might be. So I think it's a case of just understand your financials, understand your cash flow, planning for the future, understanding what funds you need. And there's two components to getting a loan approved. It's do you have the funds or equity to purchase, and do you have the ability to service the level of debt you're asking for? Some people get confused. Some people say, look, I've got all this cash in the bank, but I can't borrow. Well, I don't understand, because you've got to have the income to support. And borrowing capacity is more than just your pay slips or income you get. It's about your living expenses. It's about the liabilities you have. It's your credit report. It's all these things that you need to sort of, again, understand and plan out in the background. So when you go to a lender, when we go to lodge or recommend, we've done a hell of a lot of due diligence to prepare. So it's like going to a doctor. It's like, say you got a pain in the stomach, you go to a doctor, say, right, what's that? Tell me what it is now. or do you want to go to a doctor who says, well, let me assess you properly.
Yeah.
Once you've been assessed and we know what it is, we're going to look after you post settlement. After you. So it's the level of care and attention to detail that you want from your support network, your finance sort of advisors, and that's where I think that difference between different sort of banks and brokers is where, and same with accountants and financial advisors, you want a level of care and attention, not just do the transaction for me. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question there, or I've just gone off on another tangent, but
no, it's good. It's good. Yeah, it really is about short bursts, throw caution to the wind, or take that little bit of extra time to plan, and then you're on the right path with clarity. But yeah.
So the reason I sort of say that as well is because I've clients come across my path who've got offsets and redraws that,
Yeah.
and I was like, so what's in your redraw? No, I don't understand how the redraw works. And they got offset. They don't understand how the offset really works. I was like, so at what point in the process when you're talking to the bank or the previous scenario, how was that explained to you properly? Because again, if it's all in a rush, you're signed documents, signed credit guides.
Yeah.
These are the features. These are the repayments. It's too much for people to take on board, and
It is a lot.
they lose all the detail. And then they've got to find the property, and then they've got to manage their kids and school, and
And
so
work.
if you come back a few months and start planning that sort of in advance, you get time to settle that information into your head, ask questions. What's the offset again? How's that work again? What's what's different making fortnightly payments to monthly payments? You start to sort of build this level of knowledge, and then when you start buying property or refinance, you're just in a much stronger position. You go, I understand what's going on here, as opposed to I've put all these documents to my broker and I'm just hoping this all works. Which is not how you want it to, how you want to feel, essentially.
No, you don't want to live life that way. Okay. And so what trends or changes do you see in relation to deposits in the future?
I think it's that education piece around the types of deposits. What deposits do you need? What value do you need? 20%, 10%, 5%, 2%. I think as more and more people understand that, they're going to start realizing that they can get into property sooner. And you make the things like, well, if I'm an investor, I want to use as little cash as possible. I want to keep as much tax deductible debt, keep all that cash in my offset on my owner occupied property. So again, it will depend on your goals and your wealth creation goals through property, whether it's just owner occupied or investments. And I think that the crux of it is nothing's going to really change. You've got options now. People just don't know what their options are. Is the thing. So
that's right. There's so many of them.
Yeah, and the more we get educated through podcasts and listening to sort of different sort of shows and stuff, they're going to sort of start to realise this more and more. Go back 10 years, there was hardly any podcasts like this, and people just did 20% deposit and live in your home, you stay in forever, and that's it. It's like there's so much more you can do now to create wealth. And again, when I sort of bought my first property, like no one sort of told me that you can draw equity out and buy investments around the country. And you think, well, why would I want to do that? Like the reasons for doing that is to create wealth or passive income or to create a legacy for your children. It's like, damn it, if only had known that 15 years ago, 20, I
know.
Because it's so hard to imagine doing that and trusting people, you just don't do it. So, and it's just trying to sort of help people to sort of realize that if you may not be able to do it. It might not fit with your goals, but just start the conversation around, look, can we do an assessment? Can you unpack my finances? See what can I do? Yeah. And then once you know what you can do, you can then decide how you want to do it, whether it's now, in the future, or whether you can or you can't. And it just gives you clarity, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder if there will be a little bit more government intervention to try and get more people into their own homes, like that, the shared ownership scheme, which, sounds a little bit tricky. Yeah. But, if it means that people are not renting for the rest of their life, even if they have to do it in partnership with the government, well, is that a better way to go? I guess, only time will tell.
Again, it comes down to, what options do you have? Is that the only option you've got? Or if you've got multiple options, then you go, well, that's probably not the best choice for me. I'll go down this route. And that's what it comes down to. Is like unpacking your financials and doing that assessment is what starts the journey of what's going to be the right thing for me. Like, I'm talking to, friends at a barbecue around what they did, and they go, oh, this is great for me.
Oh my God.
And I see that all the time. Like people say, I've got this. These people have got this interest rate, or they bought property with like 5% now. Everyone's situation is very different. Yeah, and that's why you've got to sort of take everyone independently and plan for each person's. It's not like if you walk into a bank, it's just different. It's just like you just provide documents and they just do. It's a transactional yes or no.
Yeah, and they just run you down a pathway that's best for them.
Yes, that's right. They've got their options. That's their products, and that's it. For me as a broker, I'm looking for all the options. how much is going to find for you? Okay, I've got 15 options here. Now,
Yeah.
of those 15 options, which is the best one for you from a cost perspective and a features perspective and a flexibility perspective? Which one's going to give you, okay, it's this one, this, and these are the reasons why. And you go, right, that makes total sense to me. I'm going to go with that lender or that bank.
Yeah. And I guess that's where it can get overwhelming because there is so much choice, but it's just worthwhile speaking to someone who can really make life much more easier. Okay, alrighty. And so lastly, can you give us a few tips apart from all the ones that you've sprinkled through this conversation to wrap up if you're thinking about starting on your property journey, or even if you've got your home and you're starting to think about investing, what would you say the top few tips would be for people thinking about buying now?
Yeah, as I'm sort of mentioned already, is like the assessment piece is really key. Just like if you're thinking about it, get your financials unpacked. And that's not just looking at your pay slips and going, like, you can borrow X amount. It's really deep diving into like an audit of your financial situation. So that's like looking at your expenses, what you've been spending your money on the last sort of 3 to 12 months, looking at your annual costs that like your sort of quarterly costs. Because cash flow is great. It's great getting a loan approved and moving to a new property or getting another investment. But if the detail around your living expenses and your outgoings isn't really sort of 100% accurate, later on down the track, it starts to bite you a bit, because now you're sort of running out, you're going through your savings a bit more quickly than you anticipated, and it becomes more of a stressful journey. And cash is king in that situation. When you're holding property and you've got no cash in the bank, or you're going through your cash reserves quickly, panic starts to set in. That's when you can be under duress and sort of like, do I need to sell? And so again, planning all that sort of stuff in advance and having someone prove it to you. How did you assess that? And that's what I do for my clients. Is it'll be like, here's a report looking at the last 12 months of transactions for all your credit cards and statements, whatever it might be. Spending your money on average. These things you can change. This is your discretionary expenditure. This is the component you can manipulate if you want to. So again, that will really sort of set you in a stead of, right, I'm ready to buy, or I want to go and buy an investment. Like I'm in a good position now. I can show a positive cash flow. I can do this.
Yeah.
So that is the key one.
So is it like facing the truth, really?
Yeah, like
not everyone loves numbers, do they? But
no, and it's, for me as an ex-auditor accountant, it's like, if I'm going to present your situation to a bank, I want to know it's accurate. I don't want to sort of put a finger in there and go, that's about right. And you, Tom, you spend this amount a month, and that's about right. Like, because if something goes wrong, it's like, how do you then prove it? You go, oh, I didn't do any analysis on that, really. I just sort of took your word for it. That's not how it should be. You want it to be accurate. So by doing that piece of work, you can move forward comfortably. Or you go, right, if we were to take that piece of debt on now, we're going to be showing a negative cash flow position here. That's going to bite in. Do we want to do that? Like, most people go, I know, I want to change these spending habits. We can do that, and they'll make plans. So again, if you walk into a bank, they're not going to sit there and spend that time analyzing that, looking at all your credit cards, bank transactions, joint accounts, home loans. They're not going to do that. They're going to say, what do you spend on average? Is it above their benchmark? Yes. Okay, that's fine. And they sort of move forward. So for me, it's that level of assurance and quality around protecting people in the loan process and not overexposing people for debt. Other tips would be, look, there's so many options out there. Like, again, there's so many different lenders with different niches, especially for investors. Like, the borrowing capacity from one investor lender to another can vary from like $200,000 sometimes. So you might hit a roadblock with certain person or certain lender. You can always find another solution potentially.
Yeah.
And then just things that people don't think about is like structure. Like, should I buy this investment property or this home in my own name, in a corporate trust, in a company? What's the differences? Does it make a difference? What's the end game? So especially if you're buying investments, it's like, what's the end game of this? What's the goal? What's success look like to you? Is it to get to 2-3 properties and sell them? Is it to keep them forever and pass them on to your kids? Do you want to build an extensive investment property portfolio of like 5, 10, 20 properties? Structure and how you buy is really important at the start of that journey, not when you've bought 3 or 4 properties. Sort of a bit like you missed the boat a little bit. So again, the planning stage. And that's where I would say, look, if you're talking about structure, you talk to your accountant, your financial advisor, and your broker, and they should all working together. What's your goal? Where do you want to get to? And we'll help you navigate that together and get it right from the start. And then other options, things like if you can't buy property to live in right now, you might say, well, look, can you buy a property in your self-managed super fund? You might have funds in there. You've got super funds with a lot of cash in there. You don't really know what it's doing. Again, with the right financial advice, you can go and buy a property in your super fund, invest in ETFs and do bits and other pieces. You're in control of that. Again, people don't necessarily know that. They think, well, how much cash do I need to get into to do that? Again, you can find those options out by talking to your broker. And just start realizing that I've got all these different options. I've got SMS options as well. And the more you know about your options, and I think as well, like, you don't need to become the expert in everything. Like, you don't need to become the property guru yourself. You don't need to become a finance expert. You don't need to understand all the tax side of things. You need to have a general understanding, but get the team to give you the confidence as to why you should make these decisions and choices. And you go, right, I feel confident doing that. That's the right, I want to go for this type of loan or whatever it might be, or this type of property or this type of structure. That makes me feel comfortable because I know somehow you've explained it to me. And that's when you start sort of moving forwards in a nice sort of, hopefully, linear way upwards.
Yeah. And you're so right about not being the guru of all the different areas, because all of these areas change so often.
Yes.
That's the most confusing part. But if I was to pull out some of the, if I was to pull out one of the biggest tips that you mentioned through this chat, it was to use as little of your own cash as you need to as possible. So
yeah. And the reason for that is cash is king. So if you use all your cash, it's gone. If you can borrow as much as you possibly can, and if you've got cash left over, especially if it's an owner-occupied or whatever it might be, you put that cash into your offset account so you pay less interest on your home loan. So now you've got the best of both worlds. You've got less interest you're paying, and if you need cash for an emergency, you've got access to it. So the example I give to clients sometimes is, imagine if you won the lottery tomorrow, you got $1 million, and you've got $1 million of debt on your home. If you pay it all off, you've got no debt, you've got no cash. So you're back to sort of square one again. You're like, well, I've got to earn income now. So, but if you had the $1 million debt and put the $1 million into the offset account, you'd pay no interest on that home loan, and you've got all this access to cash if you need it. So you're in a really strong position. So yeah, using little cash is again, that comes down to your circumstance. Sometimes you have to use more cash because you can't service the level of debt you need. So you've got to bring the loan amount down. So again, that's the bit that myself as a broker would massage those numbers to get it to the right sort of spot for you, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate your insights. And to all those watching, thanks for visiting us today. If you would like to catch up with Adam, his contact details will be in the description, as will mine. And if people would like to send questions or further topics that they'd like us to cover, they can send those through via the email in the description. So wrapping up today, thanks very much, and let's say goodbye.
Thanks, Deborah. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Bye.